It's the right time for Right Time Radio. I'm Lynn Donovan.
And I'm Sue Hawes.
Hi, Sue. And we have
morning.
our guest today is a repeat guest, Tracy Beach. Say hey, Tracy.
Hi, how you doing?
We are so excited to have Tracy today. If you don't already follow us on Facebook, I am posting a picture of Tracy and Sue and myself right now. Just hit the button. So go on Right Time Radio on
See,
Facebook.
I got left out.
And
Isn't that just weird?
Aw, we need a picture of
the
Ty.
picture.
Okay, Ty.
There we go. I'm behind the camera.
He was behind the camera.
Yeah.
He's a good man.
Thank you.
He's the good man behind us women instead of the other way around.
I'm not going to go any further than that. Just leave that one right
I'm
there.
stopping right there as
Yeah.
well.
I always take us on a weird trail, don't I?
Yeah.
Down that rabbit hole and
Off the rails completely. Off the rails.
So sorry. So
It's all right.
sorry. Well, we are so happy you guys tuned in today. You know, we're on here every Wednesday. Do you know that, Sue?
Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Yeah, and that's really cool, and we appreciate KRLN letting us be here.
Sure.
And featuring local authors like Tracy Beach. Tracy is so fascinating. She just digs through the history, looks at news. Tell us what all you do to do your research, because it is phenomenal.
Well, the only kind of history I like is weird history. Interesting history. If it's boring, I'm not going to write it.
Right.
So I have discovered, of course, ColoradoHistoricNewspapers.com, which is a free website
Nice.
done by the, you can write that down. It's hosted for free by the Colorado History Museum in Denver.
Okay.
And it has digitized hundreds and thousands of old Colorado newspapers from all across the state. All you got to
Nice.
do is you just type in what you want. You pick your year from here to here. And like with my Baby Doe biography, I had over 6,000 newspaper articles that I went through. The Pueblo, Colorado flood, 1921 Pueblo flood, had about the same, about 6,000 newspaper articles. And back then, the people who wrote for the newspapers were a little bit more dramatic when they wrote. They're a little bit more detail-oriented. They interviewed people, and they did not leave anything out because that was their
They
entertainment.
wrote it as a story.
They wrote it as a story because you didn't have TV to watch, and
Yeah.
and
that
so
was our TV.
I mean,
Or
there's
their
like
TV.
really
Yeah.
detailed stuff, and it's great because you end up finding the stories that no one's ever heard because they're in the Denver Post story or they're
Nice.
in this story, and it's just really fun.
Yeah, so her research is phenomenal. And Sue, I've mentioned this before, Sue loves to do research on history. And so I knew getting the two of you together, although you've been together, but not under this context.
Right. Tracy
Yeah.
and I, before we came up, just immediately started
Yes.
chatting about different things that we had read
And recently researched.
and
yeah.
recently researched. And then she just gave me this great website.
Sue's got a really good idea for dead authors. We're going to look into dead authors and see what we
We're-
come up with.
I was doing some research for the Rialto for a show, and I was over at the museum in Florence, and I had all these newspaper articles in front of me. I was actually looking into Phantom Canyon at the time, and I started reading these stories that had nothing to do with what I was trying to research, but they were just fascinating, and I thought, this is stuff that we need to bring back to
Yeah,
light because these people, even writers for the Daily Record, for example, and they're just written like these fabulous stories. And she wore a blue checked dress and carried a straw picnic basket,
Yeah,
you know.
stuff
Very
you would never
descriptive.
see anymore.
Very
Yeah.
descriptive. And as Tracy pointed out, some of them, like, he lost his left eye. And I read one about a train wreck, a DNRG train wreck that happened between Florence and Pueblo. The switchman fell asleep at the...
Eden.
Okay, so she knows.
She's looked into that.
So the switch operator fell asleep and the two trains hit. Okay, so 27 people died. But the whole article, and the reason it really was fascinating to me was that one of the passengers was from Knoxville, Iowa.
Oh, there you go.
My daughter-in-law was born and raised in Knoxville, and the whole story went on about keeping him on ice until his family could get out here from
Wow,
Knoxville to claim the
yeah.
body, and then the ice taking him back. And so here, 27 Coloradans died, but the whole
we're all-
article was
Yeah.
about the
This
guy
one
from
guy.
Knoxville. Yeah.
Well, just a tidbit, the DNRG, which is the Denver and Rio Grande, they used to call it the dirty, rotten, and greasy.
I did not know that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's not
See,
cool.
fun stuff. No, that's cool
Not sure if I want to
information.
ride on this train now.
I
It's
did
like,
not-
thank you, but no.
Interesting.
I did not know that. But
That was
yeah,
the nickname they had for it.
two big passenger trains, and the guy just fell asleep at the job, and
Yeah.
boom.
I hate when that happens.
And it was in the
Stay awake,
newspaper.
Tay.
Research
Huh?
is fun.
Stay awake.
Yeah, I'll do my
See,
best.
so all of
See me
you
nodding off
children
in a
out
minute.
there who are, I don't know, probably only the homeschoolers because the school kids are in school, but the homeschoolers are, I'm sure, listening to our show because it's so informative. It's good to research.
Well, it's
is what I'm
entertaining.
saying.
Definitely entertaining. You never quite know which rabbit hole we're going to go
Oh,
down.
that's true. As by the start of the show already.
Yes,
Oh, wait, we have an
exactly.
author with us today.
Hello. Let's
Sorry,
talk about
Tracy.
that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's talk about
Do
that.
something completely different and actually stay on subject.
Sue, tell us about Tracy.
So Tracy Beach was raised in Salida, Colorado, and she's the author of The Tunnels Under Our Feet, Colorado's Forgotten Hollow Sidewalks, which I want to hear more about. My Life as a Whore, the biography of Madame Laura Evans, and the one that just horrifies me every time I hear it, Tracy,
Yes, she
Frozen to
cringes.
the Cabin Floor, the biography of Baby Doe Tabor.
Well, that's how they found her.
I know, and
We-
that's
we
your
did-
weird history.
We did that in on here too. We did that on here too.
And currently, Tracy is finishing a second Tunnels Under Our Feet book, as well as a book entitled The Night of a Thousand Heroes, which chronicles the true story of the 1921 Pueblo, Colorado flood.
And that's what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to talk about
Oh, and I
today.
also have a book called Michael, which is my first true
Michael,
crime
you
book.
skipped-
Oh, I
you
skipped.
skipped that.
I skipped over Michael.
Our
I'm sorry.
eyes skipped
It's
over.
about a family of serial killers from Stratton,
Yeah.
Colorado, buried a bunch of people on their farm.
And I'll be honest with you, she submitted that to us earlier on, and I said, I don't think we'll
Yeah,
do
she
that.
said no.
It's a little
It's like,
more
what?
family oriented, and this is making me cringe.
Well, always want your family together.
yeah,
You never
well,
know what you're going to dig up.
Yeah.
Oh my!
Well, you know, it's
that was
funny
bad.
because I'm friends with the people who are the current owners of the farm, and they said that every time that they dig a ditch or anything, they have to
Yeah.
really keep an eye out. And every so
Yeah.
often on Facebook, they'll show a picture of them holding up like a rib bone or something.
Oh, nice.
That is horrifying.
That is horrifying.
That's cool.
And it is okay. It is cool. You're right. It is cool. But
It's
I mean,
cool
it is
unless
part of
you're the
history,
owner
though.
of that rib bone.
Tracy's
Well.
got so many other wonderful stories. Let's just steer over to those. And anyway, she's been on here before, well, several times actually, but she's been on here before featuring The Night of a Thousand Heroes, but we read like the first couple of chapters.
Right.
And what she's going to share with us today is a little deeper into the story. You're starting with chapter 10, actually, and
Yes.
she's going to talk about that here in just a minute. But we're going to take a commercial break first, and then when we come back, we're going to let Tracy read chapter 10 and a little bit more of the Night of a Thousand Heroes, which is about the 1921 Pueblo flood.
People make all kinds of mistakes with life insurance, like having some coverage but not enough to keep your family in the house, or only having life insurance through work and then losing your job. Want to avoid those mistakes? Get an Allstate agent. They can help you get the coverage your family needs at an affordable price. Are you in good hands?
Call Canyon City Allstate agent Trent Rundell today and ask for a complimentary life insurance review. 275-5762. Life insurance is offered by Allstate Life Insurance Company, Northbrook, Illinois, and Lincoln Benefit Life Company, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Well, guess what? After a short hiatus, Mr. Ed's Family Restaurant is back open, and Steve says there ain't no virus gonna shut him down. Mr. Ed's will be open from Friday through Monday from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Dine-in or takeout. Now you can call Mr. Ed's at 275-5833, place your order, and choose from any one of the incredible menu choices. That number again is 275-5833 for Mr. Ed's Family Restaurant.
There was a time when people loved to listen to their favorite music on the radio. That time was earlier this week.
Surprise!
Don't you love surprises? Radio is full of surprises. According to Edison Research, radio is by far the #1 source of entertainment in the car. More than streaming, more than CDs, and more than satellite. Reach 9 out of 10 people with your message on radio. You'll be pleasantly surprised.
Call Royal Gorge Broadcasting today at 275-7488.
KRLN weather, sunny, breezy with smoky haze today. North winds 10 to 15 this afternoon. A little cooler with a high around 82. Mostly clear but hazy tonight, the low near 49. Sunny and hazy again tomorrow, the high around 83. 52 was our low this morning after a high of 85 yesterday. Now at the weather station, we have 70 degrees.
Talk Radio 1400, KRLN.
We are back with Right Time Radio, and we are talking to Tracy Beach, who is a local author who writes fascinating stories and publishes. Your books are available on Amazon, anywhere else?
Bookstores.
Bookstores. So, like Barnes & Noble.
Oh, yeah.
And
All the major bookstores.
Aren't you in Kaleidoscope also?
Yes, I am in Kaleidoscope also, and at the Florence Pioneer Museum.
There you go. And then does the library have some of your books? I thought you did.
Nice.
Because I know you've been at the book signings.
Yes.
At the library. So, yeah, Sue likes the library books. So
Well,
Sue likes
actually,
library.
I was doing a book convention up at the Denver Library, the big one downtown, and the curator guy came up to me during the convention. He goes, "Did you know your tunnel book is our most widely stolen book from this library?"
Oh, my.
He says, "We have to reorder your book like every other month." And I was like, "Well, thank you."
Yeah, what a compliment.
That actually is very much a compliment.
It's great.
Especially to someone who likes weird things.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, weird is fun. Weird is funner than normal. So, right? Don't you think? Sure. Sue's nodding, and I'm like, speak.
I keep forgetting you can't hear my head rattle.
My mother used to say, I can't hear your head rattle. All right, let's get into it. First, tell us what it is you're reading, and then just take off reading, and we'll sit here and listen.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading from my upcoming book, The Night of a Thousand Heroes, which is the true story of the 1921 Pueblo flood. And earlier, a couple months ago, I read a chapter in which the flood is hitting the trains and is flooding the town. And now I've decided I'm going to read from chapter 10, which is the morning after. And so that's where I'm going to be starting off. As the sunrise of June 4th greeted Pueblo, the storm clouds were still evident, but the tiny rays of sunlight that poked through gave people hope that the rain might soon end, as even now it had reduced itself to a mere drizzle. The onslaught of additional water from Fountain Creek, which had added 6 feet to the flood in 3 hours, had finally leveled out, leaving the depth of the flood around downtown Pueblo at a staggering but stable 10 feet. With daylight beginning to showcase the flood's wrath, Construction Superintendent George Pythian and steel worker Harry Wilcox, who had been trapped inside the partially constructed Arkansas Valley Railway, Light, and Power Company building, finally saw a chance to escape their steel prison. Less than a block away and submerged almost up to its second floor, the two men spied the 3-story tall brick building that sat directly across the street at 201 Lambkin Street, and it appeared to have motion on its upper floors. Lowering themselves down into the cold, debris-filled water, and with their teeth locked tight from a night of frigid rain and hail, the two men forced their stiffened limbs to kick away from the safety of the power company's building and prayed that they had enough strength to swim over to the building. With their frozen limbs burning with each motion and a constant fear of drowning, George and Harry finally reached the building, where they used the last of their energy to scream for help, all while struggling to keep their heads above water. Within minutes, the two men watched as one of the windows slid open and a pair of hands extended out into the water. They swore it was one of the most beautiful things they had ever seen. Over in the train yards, the remaining passengers from the Denver and Rio Grande No. 3 were still sitting huddled together on top of the Pullman cars, just as the sun began to light up the morning sky. All of the remaining passengers from the nearby Missouri Pacific No. 14 had already made their way over to the safety of the Schlitz Brewing Company building, just as the second flood had hit. but the number 3 passengers were still too scared to cross the debris field over to the nearby Knuckles plant. Seeing that the passengers were hesitant, a few men came over from the Knuckles plant and crossed the newly formed pile of debris to not only assure them that it was safe, but to help the passengers walk over the piles of logs, fractured buildings, furniture, automobiles, and dead animals. Seeing that help had arrived, Dallas Coonan stood up and began rousing the remaining passengers, while the newly arrived men, who appeared dry and well rested, began helping the battered and exhausted men, women, and children across the debris field. Unfortunately, when it came time for Dayton Kramer to cross, the sharp wood and pockets of glowing cinders within the debris proved too much for his bare foot to handle. While cursing himself for not tying his shoes in the early hours of the flood, a female passenger informed him that she had seen some footwear near one of the cars. But when he located the mud-filled shoe, he discovered that it was too small. With a shrug, he rinsed out the mud, slipped it on as far as he could, and carefully tiptoed across the debris field until he made it across. But not everyone was so lucky. Out of the almost 60 passengers from the Denver and Rio Grande number 3 that had spent the night on top of the train cars, not all of them were conscious. With quite a number discovered to be wearing only night clothes, many of them appeared to be suffering from not only shock but hypothermia, with some showing no signs of life regardless of how many people tried to wake them. Not wishing to further traumatize the remaining passengers, the unresponsive were carefully carried across the debris field to the Knuckles plant, where they were laid next to the fire and wrapped in blankets in hope that the spark of life inside them would once again ignite. As the last unconscious passenger was carried across the debris field and the train cars were checked one last time for stragglers, Dallas Coonan finally allowed himself permission to cross over to the Knuckles plant, where he received not only a warm blanket and a hot cup of coffee, but a hug from his grateful wife, Lydia. With the rain coming to an end around 8 a.m. and the sun finally shining down onto the flooded streets, the people of Pueblo once again brought out their rowboats and rafts so they could continue looking for survivors. But one particular raft wasn't going to be used to rescue a person in peril, but a hog that just wouldn't stop squealing. At the height of the flood, Memorial Hall on North Union Avenue housed many refugees as is set on the banks of the angry Arkansas River. But one refugee found himself stranded on top of a nearby building instead, and he wanted everyone within earshot to know that he wasn't very happy about it. All through the night of June 3rd and into the early morning of June 4th, the constant scream of a squealing hog echoed over the sounds of the storm, driving flood refugees mad with exhaustion, as nobody was about to get any sleep if that hog wasn't happy. When the first sets of rowboats and rafts first made their appearance on North Union Avenue, a stranded fireman inside Memorial Hall opened up a second-floor window and motioned for one of the rafts to come close so he could explain his request. Finding that the men were happy to help, the fireman climbed out through the window into the raft and directed the men towards the sound until the animal was finally located. Climbing onto the building's roof, the fireman proceeded to chase the terrified animal around until it was finally tackled and carried kicking and screaming back over to the raft. With nowhere to drop off the creature, the hog was taken back to Memorial Hall, where he happily walked around the building's marble-lined halls while the refugees enjoyed some well-earned peace and quiet. As the raft was completing its hog capture, a rowboat 5 blocks over had just arrived at the Pueblo Waterworks building, located at the corner of 4th and Grand Avenue, in search of 60-year-old John Nittiger. John had been working at the Waterworks building when the first call came in about the flood heading to Pueblo, which prompted him to begin sounding the building's steam-driven fire whistle, but his family hadn't seen him since. Entering the flooded building, John was located up near the steam whistle with his arms wrapped around a pipe and his lower body submerged in the cold floodwater. Unable to get himself down, not only because of the hypothermia, but his arthritic knees, his rescuers took extra caution in helping him down and out into the boat, which is about the same time people started to notice the airplane. Buzzing around Pueblo was 27-year-old pilot William Alexander Kimsey, who who had flown planes in the war, but now he flew newspaper reporters around to cover stories, and he could tell right away that this was going to be a big one. From an altitude of about 1,000 feet, the business district of Pueblo looks like a sea of mud and water, William announced to the reporters sitting in the rear of his plane, who were quickly writing down everything he said. The railroad station looks like an island in a lake. The tracks are completely submerged and the cars are floating about. The waters of the Arkansas are backed up on the right bank for what appears to be several blocks, and the approximate vicinity of the Vail Hotel is submerged. All of the outlying districts of the lowlands appear utterly devastated, and for miles around, there's nothing but a vast sea of mud. Dotted here and there, I can also see houses perched at some very odd angles, he added, as he continued to describe what he saw. Between Pueblo and Colorado Springs, all the bridges, as far as I can observe, are washed out, and the city is entirely cut off to the north. It's like the city was cut right in half by the flood. Looking for a place to land his plane, William found a spot near Mineral Palace Park, where he was greeted by the curious and the desperate who were hoping for news of loved ones. As William began talking with survivors, the two staff correspondents he had transported, one from the Associated Press and the other from the Rocky Mountain News, exited his plane in search of their stories, and they found a doozy. Parked underneath the towering trees which lined Mineral Palace Park were more than 20 brand-new Buick automobiles parked in perfect rows, ranging from the $395 four-door passenger coupe to the top-of-the-line seven-passenger sedan, which went for a staggering $2,285. Sitting next to the cars and tending to them as a hen would do her chicks was 20-year-old car salesman Ross Harold Edmondson. When the sirens had first begun to scream out their warnings from the side of the waterworks building, and word began to spread that a flood was coming down the Arkansas, Ross was sitting at home with his widowed mother, 45-year-old Blanche, worried that the nearby Fountain Creek might also flood and possibly reach the automobile dealership where he worked. Ross walked the one block over to the Colorado Motor Car Company and was surprised to find it deserted. Fearing the worst, Ross grabbed the keys to the most expensive car on the lot, drove it back home, picked up his mother, and took the automobile up to the highest point he could think of, which was Mineral Palace Park. Nice. Park it under a tree, and leaving his mother in charge, Ross ran the 6 blocks back to the dealership, grabbed the next part, and parked it right next to the first one.
Nice.
Over and over, Ross ran back to the dealership until the flood got too high and the car's waterlogged engines refused to turn over. Admitting defeat, he walked up to Mineral Palace Park and with his mom stood guard over his collection, hoping that when the disaster is over, his boss will see how committed he was to his job.
That's a great place to stop. What a dedicated employee.
Actually, according to Ancestry.com, he kept his job until the 1940s.
Nice.
Wow.
Which is that's the cutoff in Ancestry is the 1940s. But up to the 1940s, he's listed as still having that job.
There.
Despite
Well,
the
he
fact
should be.
he went to the war, came back, and still got his job back.
Nice. Well, I love the story about the pig. I kept expecting you to say they had a barbecue, but they did not. They rescued him and kept him, right?
Walked the marble halls.
Just walked around. Everyone
was
finally
happy.
got some sleep.
He wasn't all by himself anymore.
Yeah.
On top of everything else. A screaming pig.
Yes.
I saw that story and I just knew I had to include it. It was funny.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We are going to hear some more of this story, but we're going to go to commercial first. And when we come back, we're going to we're going to let her read some more. We will talk about some more stuff about that. And we're also going to talk about some other stuff that's going around in town that Tracy is involved in. So be sure and stay tuned because you'll want to hear about this.
Jim's Tire and Alignment stocks tires for all of your recreational and outdoor equipment. Jim's Tire huge inventory means no waiting on tires for trailers, campers, fifth wheels, and ATVs. Whether you need tires for tractors, riding mowers, or any small equipment, Jim's has it all. Jim's Tire and Alignment. Quality, price, and service. Taking care of you and your vehicle for 40 years. Jim's Tire and Alignment Service, 1005 South 9th Street in Canyon City.
Forge Radio, along with these local businesses, want to give you free money.
Visit one of these Money Day store locations. In the Alta store in Fremont County, High Country Bank, 150 Reynolds Avenue, Kaleidoscope Inspiration, 602 Main Street, Coyote Confident, Highway 115 Penrose, and Waterhome number 1, 1532 Elm Avenue.
Be present at your favorite Money Day location for Money Day. Same time, 2:30, and same channels, AM 1400 Carolyn and 104.5 Star Country.
And if you're a business in the Fremont or Pueblo County area and would like to be a part of our Money Day celebration, just give us a call, 275-7488.
Hey y'all, it's Chelsea Lynn. Join Annalie and myself every Tuesday afternoon at 2:30 at your favorite Money Day location for your chance to win some free cash.
So visit a Money Day store location. Register. Be present at a Money Day store location every Tuesday afternoon. Listen for your name, hear your name, call back, and win. It's that easy.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook for the latest Money Day details.
And welcome back to Right Time Radio with our guest Tracy Beach. And we are talking about the 1921 Pueblo flood. I can't talk this morning. The Night of 1,000 Heroes.
Yes.
And Tracy's going to pick up and tell us more about her story.
Okay, I am actually reading from chapter 10. So this is at the point in which everybody is trying to pick up the pieces from the flood. Another unusual sighting at the Mineral Palace Park was the discovery of an oddly constructed flood levee between Lake Clara and the railroad tracks that ran past the east side of the park. With the park situated near the banks of Fountain Creek, 29-year-old park superintendent Everett Edson Colby ordered his staff to cut down 13 of the park's large willow trees and use them to build a levee in case Fountain Creek flooded, which it did, twice. As the creek rose in power, the piled-down trees were further fortified with railroad ties and heavy wire cable, which succeeded in keeping the flooded creek at bay. Everett's main objective was not only to protect Lake Clara, but the park's beloved flower gardens, which he was happy to report he did. With the Mineral Palace Park full of flood refugees, automobiles, and horses wandering around, it was hard to imagine that just 2 days earlier, the Pueblo newspaper had run a story that focused on how the police had to patrol the park for spooners. Sent on patrol day and night, sometimes dressed in plain clothes, the officers were instructed to watch out for minors who would either spoon inside parked cars or be so obnoxious as to openly spoon in broad daylight.
Oh, my.
As the park wanted to be known for as a safe place for families to visit and for people to find shelter. When the flood first began to rise and people began evacuating the low-lying areas in search of higher ground, the Mineral Palace opened its doors to everyone, which is where the newspaper reporters who had just arrived on the airplane found five telegraph operators and a newspaper reporter huddled around a makeshift telegraph machine. At 9:10 p.m. on June 3rd, 40-year-old Associated Press reporter Howard Hayden had discovered that his telegraph was no longer giving out its familiar clicks of dots and dashes, which had prompted him to fight the storm in order to find the nearest Western Union office. Arriving at the office around midnight, Howard met 37-year-old Nightwire chief Emery Mitchell, and together the two men began reconnecting the telegraph lines before setting up shop inside Mineral Palace, but were only able to send out a few distress messages before the dots and dashes ceased once more, but appears to have been enough. As the newly arrived newspaper reporters approached the two men and praised them both for a job well done, the reporters began sharing stories about what they had seen from the plane, and it was worse than anyone could imagine. Adding into the conversation were 4 Denver telegraph operators who had also just arrived after reading the distress message that came over the wires at 1:30 a.m. But unlike the reporters, these men didn't have the luxury of traveling to Pueblo by airplane. The 4 telegraph operators were all part of the Denver Telegraph Division, but only one of them traveled from Denver, which is over 120 miles north of Pueblo. Facing deep water, torrential rain, washed out roads and bridges that threatened to collapse from the weight of their motor car, 33-year-old William John Burns and 19-year-old Joseph Henry more than relieved when they finally reached the Mineral Palace Park on the morning of June 4th. The third operator was a 42-year-old man named Edwin Booth Clements, who had faced similar obstacles as he traveled south from Colorado Springs, which is 45 miles north of Pueblo, while the fourth operator, 35-year-old operator Ellsworth Logan Stapp, who arrived over from the nearby town of La Junta. La Junta was around 70 miles east of Pueblo, didn't get hit by the flood until 2:30 p.m. on June 4th. But the half a dozen towns that Ellsworth had to drive past in order to reach Pueblo were definitely feeling its wrath. Washed out roads, flooded buildings, and unstable bridges stood in his way. But just like the post office, the telegraph needs to be available in rain, sleet, snow, or 12-foot wall of floodwater. But at least all four of the telegraph men had dramatic stories to tell the reporters who had arrived at the Mineral Palace by airplane. As reporters finished filling their notebooks with stories and headed back to their flying chariot, the telegraph operators and reporter Howard Hayden got back to work. Despite having their makeshift telegraph once again functional, the men all agreed that one telegraph line wasn't going to be enough to handle the traffic. Unfortunately, the only way to fix this problem was to head down into the heart of the flood and rewire more of the telegraph poles. The main office of the Western Union Telegraph Company was located at 415 North Main Street, which telegraph operator Emery Mitchell was confident was still surrounded by floodwater, but with the office up on the building's second floor, he was hopeful they had weathered the storm. Unfortunately, the telegraph company didn't store their extra equipment and spools of wire inside the building, but down at the Denver and Rio Grande Freight Depot. Located at 201 B Street, the freight depot sat across the street from Union Station, which, according to the reporters from the airplane, was still surrounded by about 10 feet of floodwater. This meant the men were going to have to use a rowboat to get to the freight depot, which was almost 2 miles from Mineral Palace. And after they arrived, they would then have to haul the wire up to the main office on 4th and Main, which is almost 20 blocks north of the freight depot. Confident that some of the roads leading into downtown will be dry, a few rowboats were required, as well as trucks to transport the telegraph men to the edge of the floodwaters. As the 5 men gathered up their supplies and prepared to leave, it was decided that Howard Hayden would stay behind at the Mineral Palace to man the one working telegraph. Wishing his comrades good luck, Howard returned to his makeshift telegraph station and sent out a distress message to both the Associated Press and the Colorado State Rangers. Loss of life in the Pueblo flood heavy. Body transported in wagons. We need food and water quick. Need bedding and milk for babies. Conditions here are very bad. Rescue work going on. Send every man you can. Hundreds in danger. As the trucks left the Mineral Palace and headed south towards downtown, the men were able to make it all the way down to 7th Street before they hit floodwater. Seeing that the east side of 7th appeared dry, the trucks began traveling down any dry street they could find, which allowed them to finally reach 1st Street before once again encountering deep water. Unloading the rowboats from the truck, the telegraph man calculated that they were still almost 10 blocks from the freight depot, and with storm clouds starting to form once again, they knew this wasn't going to be easy. Rowing out into the flooded street, the men were suddenly faced with the horrific reality of the flood's destruction on their town as they passed piles of floating debris, some of which smoked with the occasional flicker of flames deep within them. Occasionally, a human form would be spotted, some stripped bare by the violent waters that had tumbled them throughout the night, while others appeared bloodied and torn as they lay tangled amongst the partially submerged piles of furniture and lumber. As the telegraph men gently used their oars to move the bodies out of their path, they noticed a small dog running back and forth across a floating debris pile, possibly looking for his master, while nervously barking at everyone he saw. Deeper in the bowels of the flood was yet another rowboat, with this one being manned by 2 young men who thought they'd heard a woman calling for help. Turning their boat down D Street, which is only 2 blocks from Union Depot, the men discovered the sound was coming from the Mountain States Telephone Company's building. As it got closer, they were waved down by numerous telephone girls who were standing on the building's 3rd-floor fire escape. "Girls, what can we do for you?" 20-year-old Elwyn Half-Forward Dallas asked as the girls began gathering around the windows. "Get us something to eat." With the tip of his hat, Elwyn, who went by his middle name Halford, and his friend William quickly rode away in search of something to feed what appeared to be an infinite number of girls. Rowing back onto Union Avenue, the 2 men found a fruit store with its front window smashed out, which allowed them to row their boat directly into the store for some drive-through shopping. Looking for something safe for the girls to eat, the men finally spotted 2 large bunches of bananas hanging from a hook, with their ends dangling into the deep floodwater. Rowing over, they carefully removed their catch, headed back over the telephone company's building to find the girls still standing outside on the building's fire escape. Oh, looky, looky, here comes a dove with an olive branch, 18-year-old Wilma Carey cried out as Halford stood up in his rowboat and carefully handed her the bananas. Knowing that the water around the building was still too deep and unstable to risk rescuing the girls, the men promised they would return once the water subsided. But the telegraph men didn't have that luxury. Finally reaching North Union Avenue and spotting Memorial Hall off to the left, they knew they were only 4 blocks from Union Depot, which is located on the south corner of South Union and B Street. Focusing on the prize, the men continued to row until they finally spotted the depot and the piles of debris that surrounded it. Freight cars, piles of household debris, and lumber littered the deep water in front of the depot, while the bodies of numerous dead cows casually floated around them, bumping off the debris piles like they were inside a pinball machine. As the telegraph men continued down B Street towards the freight depot, they soon spotted the 3-story tall brick Arcade Hotel off to the right, which they had heard was a brothel, or at least used to be. But fortunately, with no red lights flickering in the windows to prove the rumor, the telegraph men just had to come to their own conclusions as the Denver and Rio Grande freight depot finally came into view. The 1-story tall brick building was over 2 blocks long and contained numerous large freight doors that faced the street, which were open from the inside, as well as the 2-story tall office building attached on one end. Rowing the boats up to the office building, the telegraph men could see that the floodwaters had partially submerged the first-floor windows and the main door, so decided that shimming open a window would be the best way to enter the building. Looking through their supplies, Emery Mitchell located a knife as one of the other men lit up one of the lanterns so Emery would be able to see where he was going once inside the building. Using the knife, Emery was able to unlock the window, but when he slid it open, the water quickly began to pour into the once dry office building. Quickly grabbing his lantern, he scrambled inside and closed the window behind him. As he looked through the vacant offices and rifled through the files, Emery was finally able to not only discover which storage area was rented by the Western Union Telegraph Company, but where the keys were stored. With a celebratory swing in his step and the coveted key in his hand, Emery headed down the dark hallway with only his lantern to light his way. Locating the door and sliding the key into the lock, Emery took a deep breath before opening up the storage room, which revealed not only a stockpile of supplies, but spool after spool of telegraph line. Yay. With a sigh of relief, Emery began looking through his bounty, using not only the light from his lantern, but the sunlight that was shining in through the upper windows of the exterior door. Glancing around the room once more, Emery suddenly remembered that the depth of the floodwater outside was above the level of the loading ramp, which meant the storage room would flood as soon as he opened up that exterior door. Setting down his lantern, he moved as many of the supplies up onto shelves as he could before condemning the rest to the onslaught of floodwater.
Wow.
With one last glance back, Emery raised the exterior door, which allowed over a foot of murky, debris-filled water to engulf the room. Cheering Emery's success and their good fortune, Ellsworth Stapp, Elwyn Clemens, William Burns, and Joseph Hotskins rowed their boat over towards the now open door and joined them inside the storage room, where they were all discussed not only how they were going to move all the needed equipment into the rowboats, but how they were going to reestablish connection with so many damaged telegraph poles.
Oh my goodness. This is so good. I love it. All right, let's break for one more commercial. We'll come back for a little bit more of the reading, and then we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about some other stuff that's coming up that Tracy's involved in the community. So take it away, Tate.
The Canyon City Area Recreation and Park District has a solution if you need to have someone watch your kids this summer. For children between the ages of 5 and 12, you may participate in our Kids Club program. We are open Monday through Friday between 6:45 a.m. and 6 p.m. There are games, activities, all kinds of things for kids to do and having fun with other ones their age. To get more information, all you have to do is visit our website, ccrec.org.
Liberty Mutual Insurance Company presents and Doug.
Okay, class, let's bump it up to 9.
Come on, Limu, keep pedaling. We got to build our endurance to let more people know that Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance, so you only pay for what you need.
Pick up the pace, bird legs.
Hey, don't talk to Limu like that.
I'm not, I'm talking to you.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Get a customized quote at libertymutual.com.
Do business more powerfully during Dell's semi-annual sale. Save up to 45% on Dell computers and servers with Intel Core processors. It's time for you to upgrade to new modern devices with Windows 10. Also, save on electronics and accessories, plus free shipping on everything and special financing with Dell Business Credit. Call 877-ASK-DELL to talk to a Dell Technologies advisor who can help you find just the right tech. That's 877-ASK-DELL or visit Dell.com/business deals.
KRLN weather, sunny, breezy with smoky haze today, a little cooler, the high today around 82. Mostly clear but hazy tonight, the low near 49. Then sunny with smoky haze again tomorrow, the high around 83. 85 was our high yesterday with the low this morning of 52. 73 degrees now at the weather station.
Talk Radio 1400, KRLN.
We are back with Right Time Radio with the last quarter of our show, and we're so excited we're just going to let Tracy jump right into it.
Should we just do a disclaimer before we go any further? Listen at your own risk.
What we talked about on the break.
This next part is really awesome. Go ahead, Tracy.
But it is true. It's
very
based on true events.
It is true. Completely true. Numerous newspaper stories use that word as their headline. So, yes.
Okay.
So I left off where the telegraph men are going to be gathering up all their supplies that they need to rewire the telegraph poles that went down during the 1921 Pueblo flood. And they're going to be loading all supplies into the rowboat, which means they can't no longer ride in the rowboat. They have to go in the water. As the last spool was loaded into the rowboats, Emory Mitchell sat down on a nearby box and began untying his shoes, which he quickly slid off before removing his shirt, pants, and underwear, which he folded and set aside before sliding his shoes back onto his feet. As Emory began retying his shoes, Ellsworth, Edwin, William, and Joseph began following his lead, with each man eventually dressed in nothing but their shoes and hat, as a man is always considered properly dressed when he's wearing his hat. Finding a canvas sack inside the storage room, the men placed their clothes aside before tying it tight and tossing it into one of the rowboats, just as Emory began slowly lowering himself into the debris-filled water. Surprised to find that it was only around 5 feet deep, he began pushing the debris away from the rowboats as his comrades joined him, minus one who stayed inside the storeroom so he could lower the exterior door and lead back through the office window, which he respectfully closed behind him. Unfortunately, just as the men began shimmying up their first telegraph pole, the dark storm clouds that covered the sky began to release a fine mist of rain over the group, which gave them the feeling that Mother Nature was trying to stop them from reconnecting the telegraph. Not to be defeated and already wet from their swim, the naked men continued on to their next pole while questioning if the incoming rainstorm could possibly bring on another surge of water. As the men worked, a dam that sat over 30 miles northwest of Pueblo was unwillingly accepting this new onslaught of rain. It was reaching its breaking point, and its walls were beginning to crack.
Oh. Okay, I have to say this. Don't look, Ethel!
Well, these are young guys. It's not like, overweight dads climbing up the pole,
Why their underwear? Why wouldn't you leave on your underwear?
They took everything off, only wore their shoes and their hats.
And their hats. That is just fascinating.
You don't want the water to suck you in under it, so.
And you can get caught, yeah.
Well, every single one of these guys was in World War I. They had just returned a couple years earlier, and that's just how they were taught. That clothes will pull you down in deep water. You have to remove them or it will pull you down.
So there you go.
Do you want to mention about the ladies that you told us earlier in the car?
Yeah, got caught in the barbed wire.
Oh, yes. I have another chapter that does talk about when the flood did hit Lahana. There was a family that was trying to outrun the flood, and they were driving toward Pueblo. And when the man saw the flood water coming down the Arkansas, he overcorrected his car. It ended up going into the river. The women had 2 kids with them, a toddler and an infant, and they started crawling up the hill. but the women got caught in the barbed wire fence with their long dresses. And when a ranch hand came up from the opposite side to try to free the women, the floodwater was so close, she just said, "Hey, catch," took the infant and flipped the child up in the air. The man caught it, and by the time he looked down, the women were gone.
Yeah.
And the floodwaters ripped them free of their clothes, and the only thing left in the barbed wire was their dresses. The women were later found naked in the debris.
But the one baby lived.
The one baby
So,
lived, yes.
That's cool.
Wow.
This is such a fascinating story, and there's so many more things we can talk about, but I want to really get to this one next thing. It's September. Next month is October, which gets us thinking about Halloween. And Tracy is involved with one of the coolest things that happens in Canyon City, and that is the
Abbey Haunted House.
Yeah, so tell us about that. Tell
Well,
us about what you're doing.
The Abbey Haunted House is run by Venture Crew, which is part of the Boy Scouts. It's girls and boys aged 14 to 21. My daughter has been a member for about 4 or 5 years. I started participating about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And with me being a historian, and I love horror movies, I love spooky stuff, and I love to research things, I decided that with Jason, the pack leader's permission, that I am decorating the inside wait line as a haunted museum.
Cool.
So as you enter, I have sections on the wall that will have interesting, creepy history that teaches you where different things came from. Like, for instance, in the first room, I have the story of John Wayne Gacy, he dressed as Pogo the Clown back in the 1970s, would lure children to his home, and when they finally stopped him in 1978, they found 26 kids buried in his crawl space. Well, that story was the inspiration Stephen King needed to write it and create Pennywise.
Right.
So I have the story of John Wayne Gacy, and I have the explanation of where Stephen King got
I have a
that.
question.
Yes.
The gentleman's name was what?
John Wayne Gacy.
Well, no, the gentleman is Jason, right? Isn't it Jason? Didn't you mention Jason?
That she works with at the Abbey.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
His name is Jason. Halloween. Get the.
Oh.
You just know? Okay.
No,
Bing,
no.
bing,
He's-
bing.
He's the leader of Venture Crew.
Jason's doing the haunted house.
Yeah.
He needs to- you know what? You need to get him a mask.
Well, actually, he dresses up every single year as a zombie and chases people around the grounds.
Yeah.
I still think you ought to get him
Jason.
the mask.
And you're calling this section the Odd.
It's being named the Dark Side Auditorium, ODD, because if you've ever been to a Ripley's museum, those are also called auditoriums, which is, I love Ripley's museums.
Yeah.
And it's going to say the history behind the horror. As you go through each room in the wait line, each room is dedicated to a different section of horror. I have the Ed Gein, the one who skinned and ate people, and then that was the inspiration for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, and Silence of the Lambs. And so then I explain it.
The guy, everybody needs a hobby.
Well, the thing with this man is he was really dedicated to his mom, and when she died, he started killing women her own age and making bodysuits of them so he could become his mother by wearing skin
So he's
suits.
creative.
Oh, it just gets better and better.
But this is what you get to read and look at while you're
So
waiting
you get to see
into
the background of a story, and then you get to learn this was the inspiration for this movie, the inspiration for this movie.
That's cool.
It's a learning opportunity
Yes.
while you're waiting.
It's a horror history museum.
And you said it's a new building and 2 floors this year?
Well, last year the Abbey graciously allowed Venture Crew to use the boys' old dormitory, which is right across the lawn. And so last year they built a haunted house on the first floor, and this year they have added a second floor. So you're now going to be going into a 2-story tall haunted house, which is turning out amazing.
Cool.
And the dark side of the Abbey, which is the lights out section where you go through a pitch black maze, that is still in the basement of the Abbey.
Oh, okay.
So you have 2 haunted
different
houses
places.
to go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been a big haunted house. I like to be scared. This really sounds good. I think
Well, the
this
thing
year
that's
is going
cool
to be it.
is at 1 o'clock in the morning, after all the guests have left, all the actors all gather up in the little meeting room, and you get kudos if you had made somebody pee themselves, throw up, or pass out, and so
Nice.
so you actually get credit for that because it means that you did a good job.
Tell me more about romance.
No. Let's get back to
now, right?
Oh, I don't know now.
You hear it here on Right Time
That's
Radio.
bragging
guys.
rights. You
All
can
right.
make someone peanut
When
butter.
when does that start?
It starts the first Friday of October, which I believe is the second. I think that's the first Friday of October. I think
I think there's
so.
a calendar right behind you. I think it's
there-
October
there you
right
go.
there.
Where's
It's-
October?
It'll be the second.
We're looking.
Second Friday.
And the
Yeah.
hours?
Yeah.
I haven't been alerted of the hours yet.
Dark time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dark time.
I think
Yeah.
last year it was like 7 to midnight, I think.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah, dark.
we'd have people until like 1, 2 in the morning. Oh,
Yeah.
you get so tired. You're like,
Yeah.
I can't scream anymore.
Bring in my
That is so
substitute
cool.
zombie.
I'm so glad we had time to talk about that because that's so fun.
Oh, yeah.
Your substitute zombie, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Bring in my double.
She said
Stand
she
in.
can't scream. Yeah.
And the Abbey Haunted House was rated one of the best haunted houses in the entire state of Colorado last year.
See?
We have people that travel from
We're the
different,
coolest.
from like Wyoming, different states, all around Colorado, and it was rated one of the top haunted houses in the state.
Oh, awesome.
That is
Yeah.
pretty
Pretty
cool.
good. That's pretty good bragging rights.
It is
Now-
very good bragging rights.
Just to be Debbie Downer, are there going to be any COVID things going on for the
Actually, there is the since the mask order, of course, because of our wonderful governor, is still in effect. The masks, the masks that the actors are using, there's actually surgical masks underneath of it,
Oh,
and the
okay.
masks are actually built in.
Nice.
And then the
Okay.
customers are going to have to scream through their masks?
I guess.
Or stay 6 feet apart, one or the
What
other.
if somebody throws up how much you get in a mask?
I don't know.
Oh, Tay, I love you.
Hey, you know, I'm
Be
just trying to
here
make
on
it
Right
interesting.
Time Radio, I'm just saying.
Speaking of masks, I don't see mine.
I
Who
have
did
I
you
have
mine?
one other thing I do want to talk about. Tracy, last time you talked about you went to Pueblo and was taking pictures where you could still see the flood line. You were comparing it to pictures. Are you
Yes,
still doing that project?
My final 2 chapters of the book, because whenever you're writing a book about so many different things happening,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you're not giving anyone closure. Like for instance, if there was a woman who I talk about who was found by the rescuers the next morning, and she was buried up to her chest in mud and water, holding a newborn infant above her head.
Oh,
And so
Goodness.
she had gone into labor and gotten stuck in the house and couldn't
bless her
escape.
heart,
So she
yeah.
was rescued. Her and the baby were taken to the hospital, but all the newspaper reports said that there wasn't very much signs of life and they probably wouldn't survive. Well, I have a final chapter. It's called Whatever Happened To.
Uh-huh.
I did discover later the woman did survive. The infant did survive.
Yay.
But the woman's experience had caused her to go insane, and she spent the rest of her life in the mental institution in Pueblo while her husband went on to raise the 12 kids.
The baby.
The baby, yeah.
12 kids.
Yeah, but so I have a whole chapter about the little things, so it's everyone gets closure on all the different stories, and then the chapter after that is the pictures I'm going to be taking of before and afters of what the flood picture was and what that area looks like now.
Yeah. See,
Yep.
now
that's an excellent idea.
for that chapter alone.
Right, right.
And I know you can get this at Amazon.com.
Well, it's not out yet, so
It's not out.
I've been
Oh,
busy.
that's right.
She's writing this one.
I've been
You're
busy
going.
haunting.
Yeah, she
and
has been.
building and constructing mannequins and
Any
stuff. So
any idea when it will be?
it should be out by the end of the year or early. It'll be going to
Early
the
next
publisher
year.
next month.
Well, we will let you guys know when that is available. And then we'll have you back for more.
And I'm also working on a
Great
second Tunnels
stories.
book, which will also
Good.
be out beginning of next year.
Good, good. That'll be so much fun.
Yeah.
All right, you got anything, Sue?
I think it's time to say goodbye.
It
About,
is time.
30 seconds.
Yeah,
Oh,
but I
30
wanted to
seconds.
make sure you didn't have anything.
So
you
long,
needed
farewell,
Auf
I'll be
Wiedersehen,
saying goodbye. Tracy's looking at us like, okay.
You see what I have to deal with week after week now.
to. Sue and
I may
are
be
very
visiting that lady down in Pueblo. Wow.
Can you imagine?
They're
Oh,
going
my
to
goodness.
take me away.
Oh.
One can only hope.
Did I mention I love you too?
Oh,
Well, you know, we're not insane. We're just, creative.
that's
And
another
this
way
is
of putting
Right
it.
Time Radio.
And this is Right Time Radio, and we have had a wonderful hour. Thank you, Tay. Thank you,
You're
Tracy. We want you back again with more stuff, especially your tunneling stuff. And Sue, have a great week.
We are Royal Gorge Broadcasting, AM 1400, KRLN, Canyon City, Florence, and Penrose.